Shabbat Shalom. All eyes were on New York this past week as Governor Andrew Cuomo resigned his position amidst threats of impeachment, following multiple accusations against him of harassment and abuse. Without spending 1 minute standing before a judge, the jury of public opinion convicted and sentenced one of the most powerful politicians in our country. Now, by all accounts, Governor Cuomo seems to be a pretty unpleasant human being. It must be true, after all, because people are saying it to journalists. And it must be true because I'm reading it on social media. It must be true. However, I ask you, could the resignation this week really be justice in a country committed to the notion of innocent until proven guilty? As Jews who in this week's Torah portion are reminded that a person should not suffer punishment for a crime unless two witnesses come forward and present their testimony to a judge, are we really to believe that justice has been served? Now, before I'm chased off the bema, I'm no fan of Governor Cuomo. We must affirm and acknowledge that some of the governor's accusers previously held back their stories because they feared the injustice that would come from this man's or any man's thirst for more and more power. By most accounts, our judicial system places an incredibly undue burden on women accusing men of harassment and abuse. If their cases were to go to court, would the women's testimony be fully heard, truly believed? How many times have guilty men been let off the hook because of their power, their connections, their influence, their political party, and their relationships with other men? What played out in New York this last week and over these last several weeks reminds us that whether you think the governor is guilty or not, our society is failing in its mandate. Our society is failing in the Torah's mandate. Zedek, Zedek, tirdof. Justice, justice shall you pursue. Even in 21st century America, justice remains an aspiration rather than a reality to so many. Building up to this week's Torah portion, Shof'tim, we confronted over the last 4 weeks the culture wars engulfing our country. We discussed how people of color are afraid in the United States because our country continues to experience racial disparities in wealth, education, employment, housing, policing, incarceration, political disenfranchisement, and health. In the name of justice, we wrestled with where lies the blame for these disparities and the suffering. In the name of justice, we struggled with how we might live individual lives of colorblindness, while as a society we might pursue a path of rectifying historical wrongs. We asked, too, if there's a moment at which the pursuit of justice actually becomes the practice of injustice, and how we might achieve equity without causing others to suffer as well. 2 weeks ago, and again last week with Rabbi Dallin, we spoke about wokeness. We discussed how there's a certain degree to which those of us who are not yet woke must get woke to the suffering around us, and that we must as well honor individuals' choices when those choices cause us little or no harm. At the same time, we agreed that not everyone who claims to be a victim is exclusively the victim. And we discussed how, and as an example, any argument that places blame for the suffering of Palestinians entirely on the shoulders of Israelis is naive at best and anti-Semitic at worst. In the name of justice, justice shall you pursue. We honor the notion that if a person is trying to tell us about how racism or sexism work in covert ways and not just overt ways, we should listen honestly and deeply and try to change our ways in order to end the suffering of others. In the name of pursuing justice, however, we also declare that as Jews, we must draw the line when getting woke means ignoring aspects of history. In the name of pursuing justice, too, we declare that as Jews, we must reject wokeness when it means hypocrisy and false binaries, and also when wokeness means shaming or disrespect, or allowing another to claim moral superiority without doing the hard work themselves of listening to and learning from the other side. For pursuers of justice, getting woke can and should mean using the power we have to help those who are in need. For pursuers of justice, however, getting woke cannot mean putting Jewish lives and Jewish well-being at risk. At the heart of these culture wars, we see two sides fighting over who is the greater victim, and each side using its own perceived victimhood to justify inversions of power, to rationalize acts of vengeance, and to seek vindictive retribution. In these culture wars, each side is proclaiming that it is the one exclusively pursuing justice. In our obsession with claiming victimhood, though, I wonder if any of us is actually ready to pursue the kind of justice that Judaism demands of us. I wonder if any of us is actually ready to pursue the kind of justice that will bring compromise, progress, and peace. The prophet Jeremiah helps us to understand biblical notions of justice. Jeremiah lived 2,500 years ago in the midst of the destruction of the Holy Temple. Through blood and tears, our ancestors wondered how God could seemingly abandon them. They cried out to God, desperate to understand their suffering. And through Jeremiah, God responds. If you really mend your ways and your actions, God tells us, if you execute justice between one person and another, if you do not oppress the stranger, the orphan, and the widow, if you do not shed the blood of innocent in this place, if you do not follow other gods to your own hurt, then, God tells Jeremiah, then will I let you dwell in this place, in the land that I, God, gave to your ancestors for all time. Because of our experience in Egypt, we know what it's like to be powerless. Thus, the Bible teaches us that the pursuit of justice is ensuring that the powerful do not take advantage of those with lesser power. God reminds us that when we Jews possess power, we must pursue justice by bringing equality to inherently unequal situations. The rabbis, however, offer a slightly different take on justice. The Talmud tells us of an interesting story based on a different verse in the Bible. In the book of Isaiah, God refers twice to God's own house of prayer. The rabbis look to this text and ask the questions. God prays. What could God possibly pray for? Of course, humans pray to God, but what could God pray? Rabbi Zutra then comes forward and suggests the prayers that come from God's proverbial heart. God prays to God's self, we read in the Talmud. May it be my will that my mercy may suppress my anger, and that my mercy may prevail over my other attributes, so that I may deal with my children in the attribute of mercy, and on their behalf stop short of the limit of strict justice. In other words, God prays that compassion supersedes justice. God prays that acts of mercy overtake even the great pursuit of justice. This, by the way, is the path we hope God will choose for us when we're standing before judgment in just a few weeks' time on Rosh Hashanah and on Yom Kippur. In the eyes of our rabbis, pursuing equality of power is not actually the highest virtue. Rather, we must do more than equalize power among rich and poor, strong and weak, protected and unprotected. We must allow our hearts to trump our heads, and thereby to ensure that kindness and compassion lead us in creating the society God wants us to create. I wonder then if, in telling us, Zedek, Zedek tirdov, justice, justice shall you pursue, what we should learn this week is to seek the justice in each side's perspective. In approaching the great challenges of our day, we must become attuned to the art of radical listening, to hearing the pain, the fear, the anger, the unfulfilled expectations of each side in a debate, in a court case, in society. And then we can say justice, justice. There's justice in what this person is saying, and there's justice in what that person is saying. And from there, we choose kindness. From there, we choose compassion. From there, we honor what is written elsewhere in Deuteronomy. Vasita yashar v'atov. Do what is right and do what is good in the eyes of the Lord. The Talmud tells us that for years the school of Shammai and the school of Hillel disagreed on a particular matter of Jewish law. One side said that the halakha is in accordance with their opinion, and the other side said, no, the halakha, the Jewish law, is in accordance with our opinion. Ultimately, a divine voice emerged and proclaimed, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim. Both this opinion and that opinion are both the words of the living God. That is to say, God saw the justice in each side of the argument. Justice. But because a decision ultimately needs to be made, the halakha, according to the Talmud, is in accordance with the opinion of the school of Hillel, because Hillel practiced greater kindness and respect toward the other side. Even when there is justice in both sides of the argument, Jewish law tells us to pick the side that offers the most compassion. Culture wars rage in our country today, and it feels like things are only getting worse. Progress will only come for our country when ego and self-righteousness are put into check. Progress will only come when all of us step down from our high horses and our soapboxes. Progress will come when we stop competing over claims of victimhood. Progress will come only when we recognize the suffering, the fear, the anger that exists on both sides of the debate, and when we can openly, compassionately, honestly share and discuss that suffering, that fear, that anger. Then compromise, progress, peace will come only when we seek to fulfill the mitzvah of tzedek tirdof. Justice shall you pursue. Yes, I see justice on this side of the argument, and yes, I see justice on that side of the argument. Then we come down on the side of compassion, of kindness, of respect. Then we choose to do what is right and what is good in the eyes of the Lord. Among Judaism's gifts to the world is the teaching that the antidote to political polarization and culture wars is the ability, modeled by Jews, to participate in meaningful and even heated dialogue, but dialogue rooted in respect, in radical listening, and in giving our opponent the benefit of the doubt. In the name, then, of seeking to bridge divides by facilitating communication, in the name of Shalom Bayit, of desiring peace in our national home, in the name of tzedek tirdof, justice shall you pursue. Thank you for allowing me these last few Shabbatot to share my thoughts with you, and invite you, please, with respect and kindness, to share your thinking with me. Zedek tirdof. Shabbat Shalom.